actually start, can I warn you all that this hotel does operate a pay and display system in the car park. So if any of you are actually parked in the car park, after 15 minutes, you're then liable to be either, well, I would imagine probably clamped, I don't know. But you are liable to be charged after the first 15 minutes. I do think at this time of the night, I think you're probably fine if you park on the promenade. But the actual car park of the hotel, there is a limit. Right, first of all, can I welcome you all here tonight for coming along to this UKIP public meeting. I didn't know there were so many swivel-eyed loons in Southport. Well, bring on the clowns, I say. My name is Terry Durrance, and I'm the chairman of UKIP in Southport. Now, the reason that this meeting has been called tonight is because interest in the party has been increasing, both nationally and locally. And we would like the opportunity to dispel any myths by explaining what UKIP is all about. I hope by the end of the meeting that you'll all go away more aware of UKIP's aims and policies. The three old political parties in this country no longer represent the best interest of those voters who traditionally supported them. The political class in this country is completely out of touch with the thoughts of ordinary people. In fact, for over a decade now, there has been very little difference between the Labour Party, the Conservatives, or the Liberal Democrats. They seem to have merged into a kind of social democratic mush, all trying to share the same centre ground, but without any defined worthwhile policies or purpose. In the past, you knew what each party stood for, but now they are all the same. In the words of Nigel Farage, and I'm sure you've heard of him, in the words of Nigel Farage, you couldn't put a cigarette paper between them. UKIP is patriotic. There's nothing wrong with that. UKIP says that the best people to govern Britain are the British. There's nothing wrong with that. UKIP feels that our government should put our own people first. There's nothing wrong with that. We are certainly not racist. We welcome good people from other countries who can make a positive contribution to our country, but we must have controlled borders to keep the bad people out. We are not a party for little England. We are a party for Great Britain. I am sure. Thank you. I am sure that this evening's speakers will explain why we claim, and more people are now agreeing with us, that UKIP is the common sense party. Now, the format for the evening tonight will be that each speaker will talk for around 20 minutes. That should take us up to around about 8:45. Then there'll be a chance for you to put questions to the panel. Hopefully, you've all filled in your questions, and I've got a lot of questions here, which I'll sift through whilst the others are speaking to you. And then I will bring the evening to a close around about 9:15. So you'll have no problem getting your last buses. It won't be like a Ken Dodd show, I can assure you. Please don't interrupt the speakers when they're talking, but keep the questions until the question and answer session at the end of the evening. I would like to say that in the hall tonight there are UKIP spokespeople for each of the Southport wards. They will be available at the end of the evening if any of you would like to speak to them. Just so that you know who they are, I will just quickly introduce them. There's Mike Lutus from Q Ward, in the middle there. There's Gordon Ferguson, Cambridge Ward, at the back. Pat Shanks, Meals Ward, at the back, giving you a wave, giving me a wave, giving somebody a wave. John Lyon Taylor, Duke's Ward, he's at the back as well, underneath the chandelier. Stuart Gordon, Norwood Ward, also at the back. They must have come late, all these people, they're all at the back. Jim Doyle, Ainsdale, he's at the back as well. And myself, I am the spokesman for Birkdale. Also, at the end of the meeting, there will be literature available for you to take away from the table at the back of the room. And that literature will also include membership forms, if any of you want to come and join us. And there will also be a bucket somewhere by the back door, so if anybody wants to drop any contribution in to pay for the hall this evening, you will be very welcome to do so. I will also remind you, before I pass on to our first speaker, that UKIP Southport have public meetings every month. Now that might come as a surprise to you. They're not always on this scale with guest speakers, but unlike the other parties, we aren't afraid to hold public meetings, and we have one on the second Thursday of every month at Cherry Tree Lodge in Knowsley Road. So if any of you would like to come along to any of those meetings, which are, I've got to say, perhaps a little bit more intimate than this, because you do get a chance to speak up without feeling that everybody's eyes are on you, then you're very welcome to come along the second Thursday of every month to Cherry Tree Lodge in Knowsley Road. Right, so now I'm going to, I think I've spoken enough, we're probably already over time, so I'm going to pass over to our first speaker, who is Stephen Woolfe, UKIP Treasury Spokesman. Stephen.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and what an absolutely marvellous attendance that we had today. All over the country I've been travelling, as are Paul and Louise here, for the last couple of years, going to meetings up and down this country, Scotland, Ireland, England and Wales. And we've been going to meetings like this, where initially we had a handful of people, 15, 20. Then we saw it growing into 30 and 40. And now what we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, here in this room are hundreds of people, and we must have, what, 120, 130 people here tonight, coming to listen to ourselves at UKIP, coming to listen to what we have to say about how we can make our country better, coming to listen to see how we can show you the way that it doesn't have to be run by a bunch of college kids who've lost the interest in looking after people, whoever they are, wherever they come from, and actually are concerned about this country and the people in it. Well, I'm sorry I was almost late. It's a little bit not unusual for me, but I have an excuse. My wife only gave birth about 8 weeks ago to my first child, and so I'm having to go through that process of juggling job, work, child, wife and everything. And you can tell you're a new parent, because as a man, you suddenly learn how to use one arm to do everything. When the mother-in-law is coming along, you're actually grateful. And if you see a pretty girl coming down the street, you look at her and go, I wonder if she could be a babysitter. And one of the reasons I joined UKIP, and one of the reasons I'm finding that people are joining UKIP, is because they look at their children, they look at their grandchildren, they look at their family and friends, and they say that they want to have a country, like I do, that is run by people that I elect, who can control the laws that we want to have implemented in this country, and that they can have a country that I want my daughter to grow up in that is her own, and she can call her own. For those who don't know you, I was born in Manchester, a little place called Moss Side. I worked for a mixed race family, predominantly though run by the strength of my Irish Catholic grandmother. And although we didn't have much, as many people didn't have after the war and during the 60s and 70s, there were certain basic creeds that was inculcated into us. That of hard work, that of respect for your family and your friends, respect for your elders. Those of believing that if we do the right thing, then the right thing will be done to yourself. And I was always taught that if I worked hard, if I saved money, I'd be able to make something of my life. And so I studied. I was given the opportunity, through the equivalent of a grammar school, to get to university. Once at university, I carried on my law studies and I became a barrister. Over the past few years, I've actually been a general counsel for a hedge fund running fund management. Sadly, that business has closed. They've closed because they decided EU regulations and what the EU were doing on the City of London was too harsh for them to bother staying in this country, and it was much easier to split the business and go to Hong Kong or to stay in Switzerland. But those creeds and cultures that were given to me by my family was what I saw across millions of people in this country that they believed in. And they also believed that this country had set down a set of principles, a set of rules that we could also abide in. It was our constitution. It was set down in habeas corpus. It was the rule of law. It was 12 men and women who would make a judgment on yourselves. It's the fact that we can elect people to make the rules in Parliament. We put them there, and if we didn't like what they said, we could get rid of them. These were core principles that matched the families and the wishes of the people of this country. But what have we seen, ladies and gentlemen, over the past 40 years? We've seen 75% of our laws now being taken and decided on and made in a different country. We can see things going wrong in this country. 1 million young people under the age of 25, and yet we've allowed 4 million people from outside of this country to come in the last 10 years. We were told that if we join the European Union, it will be a boon for jobs, a boon for business, a boon in GDP for this country. Well, as part of my role as the Financial Services spokesman, it's actually to show you and debunk those principles. Let's talk about jobs. And when you talk to people who talk about the European Union and say, it's great for jobs, it's been wonderful. In the first 5 years, after 75, we lost 40,000 jobs in the United Kingdom. Well, not many people say, well, that's okay, we must have increased our trade. In the first 10 years of our membership of the European Union, we lost 1 million jobs. Okay? Maybe you think that's something that we can handle for the growth and our friendship, the ability to get on a plane and not have a visa when we land in France and Germany. But after the first 20 years of our membership of the European Union, we lost 2 million male jobs. 2 million men in this country have less work and the inability to work than we did when we joined the European Union. Yes, we've created jobs, and we've created an enormous number of service sector jobs. We've created an enormous number of part-time jobs, and they have been filled predominantly by women. And we're grateful that they are able to have those jobs, because what we're seeing in this country is a lot of men not being able to work. But let's also look at the other side of the coin. Whilst we have the benefit that women are working, we are seeing that the jobs that are significant in industry have collapsed. They should have been taken up by services, and in some ways, we are doing. But what we're finding is that when it comes to jobs in this country during this period of the recession, there are 2 key features that I've taken out of the statistics produced by this government. The first is that 800,000 people born in this country have not been able to find jobs when the recession hit. i.e. 800,000 have lost their jobs. But 400,000 who came into the country in the past 10 years and continue to come into this country take the jobs. And so we're seeing an effective deficit of 1.2 million jobs to people born in this country. Instead of being a job creator, the European Union is a job destroyer for people born in this country. And UKIP say that is wrong, UKIP says it should stop, and UKIP says we should put our own people first when it comes to employment. And let's look also then, ladies and gentlemen, at the issue of wealth, of the creation of business. They say to us, well, Stephen, if we leave the European Union, we'll be much worse off. Business will leave. We'll lose the top table. We won't be able to sit there with the Chinese. They'll be able to take over, as the Indians will be able to take over, because we won't have the power of working in a nation of 550 million people. Well, again, I ask you to look at the statistics on this. Is it really serious to think that if we left the European Union, we wouldn't be able to trade with any of the other countries? Take BMW. Do you think they're going to remove the BMW stores up and down this country and say, because you've left the European Union, Britain, we're not actually going to sell you any BMW cars? Do you think you're actually going to stop paying your high gas and electricity bills to German and French companies? We'll say, no, we'll pull out and give it to somebody else because you've left the European Union. Do you think the millionaires on the front bench of the Labour Party, or the school kids who've gone to the same colleges of the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, will stop drinking their French wine or eating their Spanish sausage because we've left the European Union? No. All those businesses, all that trade would still continue simply because of two factors. The first is they need us more than we need them. Every single year we have a trade deficit, i.e. we spend more with them than they would do with us, of over £13 billion. Over the last 5 years alone, there's a trade deficit of £150 billion. That's an awful lot of money if they want to say, we're going to stop trading with Britain, or we're going to give you some sort of tariff. I don't believe it. I don't think you believe it. I'm certain the government don't believe it, but they will want to make you scared and fearful, so they will keep pushing this argument down. And the second key argument is that they mention the issue of 3 million jobs being lost. Well, that's got to be debunked too. Yes, there might be a few jobs. There could be MEPs, and Paul might lose his job up there, but I tell you what, he'd be glad if he did. But there'd be a load of civil servants in the European Union that would lose their jobs. There'd be hundreds and thousands of lobbyists who are earning millions of pounds a year on the back of representing companies to change the rules that would lose their jobs. But the man and woman selling your BMW won't lose their job. The person selling French wine won't lose their job. The head of E.ON and the electricity companies won't lose their job because the trade will still be going on. And more importantly than that, there are 8 million jobs in Europe relying upon the trade with the United Kingdom. So let's get this clear. In economic terms, our removal from the European Union will not only save us the £55 million a day that we have as our membership fee, but would give us the ability to trade with other countries around the world, and we'd still be able to trade with Europe because they've got more to lose than we do. So in economic terms, we'd be better off. In terms of jobs, we'd be better off. And in terms of the way that we feel about ourselves, we'd be much better off. How often are we told, ladies and gentlemen, that we're no good, that we don't work hard, that we're insignificant? Only if this week, or last week, we had a member of Parliament, the Speaker of the House of Commons, go over to Romania and say Romanian workers are much better workers than British workers. How often have we been told that we're lazy, that we simply can't do the jobs, and that's why we need people coming in from abroad to do it? How often are we being told that we've got to pay reparations for things that happened in the past? How often are we told that we must lose our dignity, our belief that England and Britain is a great country? And it's part of an underlying feeling that the elite want to remove ourselves as a great nation, and I don't believe it. Because I grew up in a nation that allowed a little boy to come from our side, to stand in front of you today as a barrister, and able to say to my child that I have seen my grandfather fight against a European dictator so that I can have the freedom and speech to be able to speak to you today. And that I am today doing exactly the same thing as many people in this audience are, fighting against a European dictator. Because in the days that we had people in small audiences appearing for UKIP, ladies and gentlemen, that number of sellers got bigger because they stood up. And then a few more people stood up. And then they stood up together until there was 50 and 100. And now across the country, there are millions of people standing up, believing in this country, believing that we're a great nation, voting for UKIP because they want their country back. Because they believe that every man and woman in this country must be regarded as equal, irrespective of their background, creed, colour or religion. Because they believe that every man and woman in this country has the right to vote and to be dignified and treated with respect. They believe that every man and woman in this country has a right to be free. And in standing up together, as we are in UKIP, we're standing up for those ancient values that we see as significant, the principles of this great nation that we believe in today. As I've mentioned, habeas corpus, freedom of speech, the rule of law. This great nation of Elizabeth I, Drake and Nelson, of Wellington and Churchill, who all believed that we should have dignity, and who understood the nation's values and beliefs, and who stood up to defend those values at times of trouble. And people like my grandfather, who, without hesitation and without request, fought in the sands of Africa so that we can have that freedom and dignity. And that is because in this country now, we're not being attacked by armies and aircraft, but with legislation and regulation. This time we're not being invaded on our beaches, but we're being taken over by our economic leaders. This time it isn't being defended by the people that we've elected, but they're surrendering it in silence. Well, all I see to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're not surrendering in silence. UKIP will never surrender in silence. This people of this country will not surrender in silence and watch our great, brilliant nation be taken over by another European dictator who controls what we do, controls what we say. And I say thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming today, because it gave me great hope for me and my daughter to see so many people standing up and not surrendering in silence. Thank you.
Stephen. I've seen Stephen quite a bit quite recently on the television, various programmes, on the politics programmes and whatever, and I've got to say he always comes across as very cool, calm and collected. As is our next guest tonight, who's a member of UKIP's NEC, Councillor Louise Bours.
Down and dirty with the folks. Good evening, everybody. My name's Louise Bours. I'm a councillor in Cheshire, and I also sit on the National Executive along with Stephen over there, of which we have lots of good fun, don't we, Stephen? Yes, and we boss about Paul, because obviously technically we are his boss, as we like to remind him often. So that's always good fun as well, just reminding him, you know, keeping him in his place and all that. I'm a councillor in Cheshire, and my passion is local government, local elections. I went into politics for one reason, and that is because I loved the community in which I lived. I loved the town in which I was born, and I wanted to serve those people, to give a voice to those people who I felt could not stand up for themselves. And so I put myself forward for election. And I was lucky enough to be elected back in 2003, but unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I was on the dark side. I have to admit, I was a Conservative councillor. Please don't throw me with tomatoes or rotten fruit or anything like that. But I did come to my senses. I came to my senses when David Cameron took over as leader of the Conservative Party, and I stayed for a short while as an independent councillor, and that was quite tough, folks. I have to admit that is quite tough, being that lone independent voice. However, in 2009 I went to a public meeting and I listened to two speakers. One was our regional organiser, Fred McGlade, who I think is here somewhere in the room. I'm sure I can smell the whiskey. Oh, is it? Oh, he's in the other room. Yeah, I can smell the whiskey. Sorry, Fred. And the other one, the other speaker that evening was Paul Nuttall, our deputy leader. Now he was quite inspiring, I have to admit. I was very impressed with what I heard that night. And by the end of the evening, I'd not only signed up to be a member of UKIP, but Fred had got me signed up to be a PPC, a council candidate, an officer in a branch, everything you can possibly imagine. He's very persuasive, is Fred, isn't he? For those of you who know him. But goodness me, I was jolly glad I did. Because within UKIP, what I found is a home, a political home, with people who believe in the kind of things that I believe in. They believe in the kind of country that I want to give to my two daughters. And they want to stand up and be a part of the community in which I am very proud to be a member, as I am sure you are very proud to be members of the community here in Southport. So how can we support our communities, ladies and gentlemen? What is the most important and vital service that we can provide for the people who we live and work alongside? Well, I believe it's by serving them as a public servant on a council. I don't believe any job is more important than that. I think in UKIP, and this is a criticism that I think is fair, that has been levelled at us, we do not or did not take local elections seriously. We did not see the importance of local elections. We were unable to make that connection between our local council chamber and the European Union. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you now, we will never ever achieve the goal that we all want to see, which is obviously withdrawal from the European Union and Great Britain being a wonderful independent nation once more, if we first don't people our council chambers with elected representatives. Because that is the only way, folks, that we're going to get representation in Westminster. Success in local elections. And I think, if you think back over the past few months, where has our massive surge, this huge momentum, the success we are experiencing at the moment, where has that come from? That has come from local election success in May. That is what has caused the earthquake and this tremendous tornado that has swept across the nation the past few months. Local elections. Because the people in power at the moment, the political elite, didn't believe that we could be elected to local government. They didn't believe that the people, the electorate, would trust us. Well, we showed them, didn't we? We really did show them in May, because they do trust us. They are starting to trust us with their local vote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important. The only reason we achieved second place in Eastleigh is because the Liberal Democrats were able to hold on to that seat for one reason only. They peopled the council chambers. The Liberal Democrats retained that seat because the parish councils, the borough councils and the county councils were jam-packed to the rafters of Liberal Democrat councillors. So even though Diane James did a splendid job, we were never going to win there, because the local people trusted their local councillors. And no matter what the National Party did, no matter how many sex scandals, or no matter how many points debacles Chris Hume was going through, the councillors were trusted. And that is one thing that we all have to understand. That is our way to Westminster, the council chamber. So when your local elections come next year, because yours are coming around in 2014, you have a fantastic opportunity, because your local elections will be on the same day as the European elections. And people will not go into the ballot box and vote one way in the European election and another way in a local election. They will vote, if there is UKIP candidates, for UKIP candidates on both ballot papers. So we have a splendid opportunity to create a landslide victory in terms of local government next year. And then we can do a really, really special thing. We can let people show what we stand for. Because a lot of the time there is a criticism levelled at us, and again I think this is fair, that people know what we're against, they all know what we moan about, they all know the things that we think are bad about the European Union, etc, etc, etc. But one thing that people ask me all the time on the doorstep is, but we don't actually know what you're for. We don't actually know what you stand for. So what I would like to do, all of those who are thinking of standing as council candidates in the elections next year, have a really good think about what we stand for. What would you say to people on the doorstep? And what I would say to you is this. What are the things that are most important to people? The children's education, probably, is paramount in most families' mind. So talk to them about education. Talk to them about how we believe that education should be through ability and not through wealth. We want a grammar school system that praises and takes the brightest and the best from our primary schools and gives them that social mobility that is now denied them. There was an Ofsted report today that has been published today, ladies and gentlemen, and in that Ofsted report it says that our children are now being let down by this country and by the education system because they are all lumped together in a homogeneous mass, that the brightest and the best are being held back. That is absolutely unforgivable, because we want what's best for our children, don't we, ladies and gentlemen? And this government has taken that away from us. When we talk about law and order, when they ask what we stand for, tell them that we stand for a zero-tolerance approach to low-level signature crime. We won't put up with vandalism. We won't put up with low-level drug abuse. We want to see more bobbies on the beats. We want to see respect. We want to see sentences mean what they say. We want to see the punishment to fit the crime. And I think, again, that is something that has been taken away from us, bit by bit, systematically, by this liberal left government, a social democratic government. Because now there's no difference, like Terry said in his introduction, between any of the parties. We now just have 3 social democratic parties and UKIP as the only opposition party in this country today. When they ask about immigration, which is obviously always a hot potato, you can explain to people that we are the only political party who, in our constitution, do not allow anybody who has been a member of a far-right organisation to join our ranks. So when they accuse you of being racist, or the BNP and Blazers, you can tell them, well, I'm sorry. In our constitution, if you are a member of any of those kind of groups, you will not be welcome here in UKIP. Just because we want to regain control of our borders, just because we don't want benefit tourism, just because we want to have this country for our children and let the jobs be here for them, doesn't make us racist. It makes us realists. We're an island. It's all about common sense, folks. So all these things will come up next year in your local elections, and these are all things that you can explain to people so they can see that we're just not a party about Europe, no longer. No longer can people say we're a single issue pressure group. That's now gone. We have to now concentrate on the domestic agenda. We have to concentrate on the local domestic agenda. We have to find the things that are affecting your communities on a day-to-day basis, the things that are really making people's lives unpleasant, whether that's planning applications, whether that's lack of youth facilities, whether that's dog fouling, all these really unglamorous issues that obviously we don't talk about, we don't hear our big politicians talk about doing, but these are the things that affect all of us, aren't they, on a day-to-day basis. Antisocial behaviour. This is why councils are so important. These are why the people we choose to represent us on those councils are so important. When Terry, as I'm sure he will next year, oh, he's over there now. When Terry asks for candidates for these local elections, I'm hoping that next year we are able to fill every single ballot paper with UKIP candidates, so that we give everybody the opportunity to vote for a UKIP candidate, wherever they may be. That is really important, and that will be our goal here in the North West. We nearly filled that. We did really well this year in achieving that, but we need to go even further. And for that to happen, we need you, ladies and gentlemen, people like you here today, here this evening, to commit and to come and work with us and to put yourself forward. And sometimes that means that you have to put your head above the parapet. And that can be a bit scary sometimes, can't it? As we've seen with some of our councillors who were elected this time, they've had a few problems. You know, but these are people who were just trying to do the best for their communities. Sometimes it can be hard because the spotlight's on us now, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it? The main political parties are now, they have the magnifying glass on everything we do. So with that brings great rights and responsibilities. So we have to behave in a way that is befitting of a professional political organisation. We have to make sure our conduct is befitting of the party, and we have to wear UKIP proudly and make sure that our behaviour on the things that we say and do, whether that is through social media, in the newspapers, through letters, columns, etc. Everything we say now, we have to make sure that we say it in a considered manner. With passion, yes, but we now have to be aware that we are representing the fourth largest party in the country. We have now made this country a four-party political system, and that is something to be very, very proud of. That has never happened in this country before. So what we're going to do next year, when we look at the people who govern us at the moment, the people who sit in Westminster on our behalf, I feel they're so disengaged from us, aren't they? I mean, do you feel that they really represent you? No, not at all. I mean, how have they got anything in common with us? Especially if you're a Labour voter, an ex-Labour voter. You look at the Labour front bench. How can any of those people understand what it is to live on a council estate in the middle of Manchester or Liverpool, or go to a really bad comprehensive school, or have to really struggle to feed your family? I mean, it's a disgrace now that we actually have food banks up and down the northwest of England, whilst we're still sending international aid to countries like India and China. Our families and our children have to be fed through food banks. It's an absolute disgrace. A very famous political philosopher called Harold Laswell once said that politics is all about who gets what, when and how. And if you think about it, it's really right, isn't it, that, if you think about it? It absolutely is that. But unfortunately, the people who are doing the deciding are those elitist, multimillionaire baronets that are so detached from the real world, they can't possibly understand what it is to live and work and be a part of the communities that we all belong to. This is why we need representation in local government, in our local council chambers, because there you become a very direct voice for the people who live with you and work with you. I'm so proud, you know, to be a member of this party, so proud. And when I look at everybody here this evening, especially all the ladies, because sometimes I can go places, ladies, you know, I'm the only girl. Really? I mean, I sit on that national executive with Stephen and I'm the only female. It's very sad. So I'm on a one-woman mission to make sure we get more women in UKIP elected. That's what I'm doing at the moment. But besides that, it is lovely to see such a mix of men and women here who feel the same kind of passion and the same commitment and want to make a difference to the communities in which they live. Because I truly believe, ladies and gentlemen, that it's people like you People like you here this evening who want what is best for your families. And it's people like you who want what is best for the communities in which we live in our towns and cities. And it's people like you, and you alone, who want what is best for Britain. So join with us, ladies and gentlemen, help Terry to make this branch fantastic, stand in the local elections next year and make this country a country to be proud and make UKIP a party to be proud of. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Louise. Following on from what Louise was saying, as the chairman of the Southport branch, I can guarantee to you that we will have a candidate in every ward in Southport in the next local elections. Moving on, I noticed Stephen was prepared to use the microphone that was set at the lectern. Louise chose to use the microphone on the floor. There's no way of telling where Paul is going to want the microphone. I'll let him tell me. Can I now announce the UKIP Deputy Party Leader, Paul Nuttall, MEP.
Right, can everyone hear me? No. I don't need the microphone. There we are. Okay, well, first I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to Terry and the team for putting on such a great event. I think they deserve a round of applause. And personally, it's a big difference for me. I mean, I started UKIP meetings back in late 2004. I'd just come back from living in Spain, and I had this real urge to join this political party, which I believed at the time was going places. I felt that Britain was on the cusp of needing something new. I logged on to the UKIP website, which was probably the first time I'd used a computer in my life, looked at the policies and decided that's the party for me. And I decided to form a branch just down the road in Birkdale. And it's great to see some faces here tonight, like Joe, who attended that very first branch meeting. I think there were 14 people in the St Monica's Club in Birkdale, and that's where my life in UKIP really began, alongside with Joe's as well. And we've been on a journey, and we've seen this party improve. And I've spoken a number of times in Southport, and I must say, I'm so impressed by the fact that there are over 100 people in this room tonight. It just goes to prove that this party is electrifying communities. People are excited about politics once again, and people are enjoying what we have to say, because let's be frank, what we're saying is what the man on the street is saying, either in the pub on a Friday night, or at the Women's Institute, or the Bridge Club. We're speaking the language of the people, we're speaking common sense. Now, for those of you who are new tonight and don't know that much about UKIP, let me just give you a quick, brief history. UKIP was born as the Anti-Federalist League back in 1992, and it was a group which came together to campaign against the Maastricht Treaty. And this group all met in the London School of Economics in a small room. And once the Maastricht Treaty went through, they decided to form a political party that would stand in elections. The first real breakthrough as UKIP came in 1999, when we took 2 seats, 3 seats, I apologise, in the European Parliament. This moved on to 2004, when we had a fantastic success at the 2004 European elections, mainly off the back of a certain TV host of an orange complexion known as Kilroy. We don't talk about him anymore. The party then moved on from finishing third in 2004 to finishing second in 2009 in the European elections, taking 13 MEPs back to Brussels. But back then, it was a political party in name only, I would suggest. It was a party which was formed to fight the European Union, and it was a party which focused on getting us out of the European Union. But we've changed, we've moved on, we've broadened our agenda, and it hasn't happened by accident. It was a conscious decision that we took in about 2008 to develop a manifesto, a radical raft of policies that are different from the establishment at Westminster. And I don't think it's any coincidence that you're now seeing UKIP polling nationally around 20%. It's dropped in the last opinion poll, some of you may say, but there'll be an opinion poll out at the weekend which will have UKIP in the high teens, no doubt, for the general election. UKIP is polling 30% for next year's European elections. And these are elections which I believe we will go on and win. The majority of MEPs that are sent back to Brussels will be MEPs who want to get our country back and want Britain to leave the European Union. And locally, we're polling even better. In the opinion polls in the North West, some are saying that we're a percentage point ahead of the Conservatives, over double the Liberal Democrat percentage. If the polls are to be taken at face value, then UKIP is the opposition to Labour here in the North West. But we're also doing well in elections. We finished second in Eastleigh, as Louise said earlier. In the past 4 by-elections in the north of England, we finished second. We finished second in Barnsley. We finished 4%. This is a political party, ladies and gentlemen, that is going places. This is a political party, or a movement, or a way of thinking, or an ideology. This is a party which is exciting to be a member of. I would suggest to you, and I'm a historian, that there can be no political party where the excitement has ran so high since the birth of the Labour Party. We are on the cusp of changing British politics, and I believe it's because we're getting our policies right. Let me just give you a few. On immigration, we want a firm but fair immigration policy. We're saying it makes absolutely no sense to open up the doors to the whole of Eastern Europe when 22% of our own young people are unemployed. That's 1 million of our youngsters who can't get jobs, and what will happen, I guarantee it, it will be wages will be driven down for working class people, and many of them will be put out of work, and UKIP says that this is unacceptable. All we're asking for is a system like Australia. There's nothing racist about that. If you have the skills and the ability, and we need those skills and that expertise, please come to this country and work. And I don't care what colour you are, what religion you are, if we need your skills, yes, please come here and work. But what we don't want to see is benefit tourism and people taking out of the system without ever putting in. policies on crime. As again Louise said earlier, I was the biggest advocate in UKIP for us standing in the police commissioner elections, because I believed that it was a fantastic opportunity for this party to tell the public that we're not just about Europe, that we have other policies, and our policies on crime resonate with people. And I thank Louise and Stephen for both putting their heads above the parapet and standing in the PCC elections. Louise in Cheshire, Stephen in Greater Manchester. They did a fantastic job on behalf of the party. But what are our policies on crime? Well, what we're saying is that we believe in zero tolerance. We believe that the sentence should fit the crime. We want to see a society where the elderly are safe to go out of an evening. We want to see a society where our young people are facing up with violence on the streets and drugs. What we want to see are bobbies on the beat. Not PCSOs, but real police officers who will make a difference. We want to see sentences fit the crime, which will mean building more prisons. Yes, I believe in rehabilitation, but I tell you what, I believe deterrent comes first. And crime, where we are on the cusp of a crime wave, and it's linked to immigration. On January the 1st next year, all restrictions to Bulgaria and Romania fall. Let me just give you a statistic. There are around 100,000 Romanians in this country already here. In the past 3 years, 28,000 arrests have been made. Once those restrictions fall, we will see a crime wave. We're beginning to see it already, and what UKIP wants to do is to say no to this, because we believe we need to get out of the European Union, and only then will we be able to stop this oncoming crime wave, because we will be able to control our own borders. My passion is education. I have spent my working life before I was elected lecturing and working in education. I went through further education, higher education. It's my passion. And as you can guess from my accent, I'm born, Bootle, bred. And I believe everybody, whether you're working class or middle class, has the right to a good education. Because that's not what we have at the moment. What we have at the moment is, if you're wealthy, you can buy yourself into a decent area and send your kids to a decent school. If you're not wealthy, you get stuck with your kids in the SINC comprehensive system. Now, I went to a school in Bootle called Savio, and I know that the kids in my school, or the lads and girls in my class, should have gone on to be accountants and solicitors and teachers, but many of them didn't. And the reason why they didn't was because their parents were not wealthy and because they were left to rot. If they were from Crosby or Formby, it would have been a different situation. So I believe that this thing needs to be levelled out. And the only way you will level it out, and the only way we can have education in this country by ability and not wealth, is by putting a grammar school in every single town and city. And then we move on into higher education. Who agrees with me that it is absolutely crazy to say that 50% of 18-year-olds should go to university? What we need to do is we need to give these 18-year-olds the opportunities of apprenticeships. We need to ensure that vocational education isn't looked down upon. You know, in Germany, vocational education and academia are on a level playing field. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Germany has kept its manufacturing base whilst ours has gone to the wall. We need to reduce the number of kids going to university, probably back to about 25%, and then you know what you can do? You can do away with tuition fees altogether. We can go back to a grant system, and we can give working class kids the opportunity to go to university. Wrong with education in this country when the top 8 schools send more kids to Oxford and Cambridge than the bottom 2,000 put together. There is something fundamentally wrong when there were more working class kids at Oxford and Cambridge in the 60s than there is now, and UKIP will go about to make that change. We have sensible policies on the environment. We believe that renewables have a place, but we don't believe that they're the be-all and end-all, and UKIP will oppose the construction of any more wind farms in this country. And you know, we have the biggest proponent of wind farms in the northwest is a Liberal Democrat MEP called Chris Davis. He sits on the Environment Committee in the European Parliament. He's holier than thou. He tells us we need more renewables, but what he fails to tell people, that he has shares in a renewables company, and I say that this is a disgrace. We believe in direct democracy. We believe in trusting the people. What UKIP wants to see is a system like Switzerland. If you don't want that wind farm built on the hill overlooking your house, or you don't want your local sports stadium to close, or your local pub turned into a Tesco Express, let's put it to a local referendum. Let's give the people the choice, because what UKIP will do is UKIP will trust the people, and that's why UKIP councillors do not have a whip system. If you elect a UKIP councillor, that UKIP councillor will be there to serve your community and will always put the people above party, because I believe that that is the right way to do it, and if we can do away, if possible, the influence of a party whip system in local government, that's what we should do. Yeah. Now, of course, UKIP was formed to fight the European Union. Where are we now? As Stephen said earlier, 75% of our laws are made not by MEPs, and please don't believe this nonsense if they try to tell you it next year, like I'm sure the Labour and the Liberal Democrat will, in an effort to justify their own jobs. It's not. The Lisbon Treaty makes it perfectly clear. Only the European Commission can initiate legislation. That legislation is handed down to MPs to rubber stamp. 75% of the laws of this country are now made by a European Commission that meets in secret with 3,000 working groups made up of big business and lobbyists. How can that be right? What are these people doing? What are our politicians doing, giving away the rights that our forefathers fought so hard to protect? It's an absolute disgrace. The undemocratic nature of this European Union, it's the cost as well. We're spending £53 million a day to be members of this club, and that is only the membership fee. There are serious economists and think tanks who think that for us to comply with the EU regulations and directives, it's costing us up to £100 billion a year. Professor Tim Condon, one of John Major's wise men, believes it costs 10% of British GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be better off outside this costly, undemocratic club. Oh, good old David Cameron tells us, don't worry folks, there'll be a referendum. A referendum when? 2017, after going negotiation, which he's already said he will then campaign to stay in the European Union. I've never heard of anybody giving the game away before they've gone into negotiation. It makes no sense. The fact of the matter is that the Conservatives will struggle to win in 2015 anyway. All Cameron has tried to do is to kick this issue into the long grass, down the road. The fact is, this man cannot be trusted on the issue of the European Union. He gave us a cast iron guarantee. And besides, UKIP will stand against the Conservatives because we are a political party and political parties stand and fight in elections. Now, next year, it's the European elections. I believe we will win those elections. I believe that this party will then create a platform to go on and make a political earthquake in 2015. But next year, you will hear some myths spread about by the other political parties. As Stephen has rightly pointed out, they will talk about if Britain leaves the European Union, there will be 3 million jobs lost in this country. It's nonsense. There will not be one job lost. In fact, if we do away with much of the regulation and the directives, we can trade once again with the globe. We're a global power. We're the 6th largest economy in the world. They will tell us that if you leave the European Union, you won't be at the top table when decisions are made. You will end up like Norway, a facts democracy, who obviously have to comply with EU directives and regulations, but are not within the European Union. Now, I'm sorry, we're not Norway, we're Great Britain. We're the 6th largest economy in the world, and I'll tell you something else. There's another organisation out there who we turned our back on in the 1970s, which is a quarter of the globe and a quarter of the world's peoples, and these are the people we should be looking to, not the European Union. We should be re-engaging with the Commonwealth. So yes, we will get out the European Union. I genuinely believe that. Because what we were sold in the first place was a lie. What many of you would have voted for in '75 is not what it's become. We thought we were signing up for trade. What we didn't sign up for was a flag, an anthem, a parliament, an external action service, embassies, £53 million a day, can't control our own borders, don't make our own laws, has our fisheries destroyed by this organisation. We didn't sign up to that. We've been hoodwinked. The British people are cottoning onto this fact, and I think the scary thing is when the Labour Party say, oh well, we don't need a referendum, or the Liberal Democrats, who had a commitment to a referendum in their last manifesto. Well, you can't believe any of that, they put it in. But they had a commitment in their manifesto in 2010 to give us that referendum. In fact, I've got a leaflet by Nick Clegg at home where it says, give us the referendum we want, in or out. It's just a farce, isn't it? But we need a referendum. We need a referendum because if you're under 52, you've never had the opportunity of the vote. What we don't want is a referendum in 2017. What we don't want is a kick down the road. We want a referendum in UKIP, and we want a referendum now in this Parliament. That's the way it should be, because we shouldn't be hoodwinked again. Now I can see that my 20 minutes are up. I've gone slightly over, I apologise. But ladies and gentlemen, I thank you ever so much for coming tonight. I thank the Southport branch for inviting me. All I will say is, as Louise said earlier, local elections are the key. They are the Trojan horse to Westminster. If you don't have councillors, you won't get MPs. And we need MPs. to get out of the European Union, because the decisions are made in Westminster. Yes, next year's European elections are important because they will give us a platform, but the key next year are those local elections, and I implore you, I ask you, please put your name forward to be a UKIP candidate. Please get out and spread the message. Please continue to put out leaflets, as I know you do already in this hard-working Southport branch. Write letters to the press, talk to your friends, because, ladies and gentlemen, please be excited. This party's going places. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. You might not need a microphone, but I do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move on to the question and answer session. But before we do that, can I just ask you once again to give a good round of applause for our three speakers tonight. Thank you. And also, I've just been given an announcement to make before we move on to the question and answer session. One is to let you know that we are putting up a publicity stall at the Armed Forces Day on June the 28th, I think it is, isn't it? June the 28th in Prince's Park. And the other announcement, which I've only just found out tonight, and you might be interested, because you should be home in time. In fact, I know you will be home in time unless you're stopping off somewhere on the way, is that on Question Time tonight on BBC One, Nigel Farage is on the panel. And what you might find interesting there is that it's a very late booking. I think he was only asked yesterday, or even this morning perhaps, to go on. And what you might find interesting is the fact that tonight's Question Time comes from Edinburgh. So that could be quite interesting. I would imagine there's quite a crowd outside the studios now. Right, okay, so we're now going to move on to the questions. I've just had a couple more given to me. What I will do, I've tried to sort some of these questions from the point of view, if there are two on a similar theme, I'll read them both out so that the panel can deal with them together. I'm trying to talk quite slowly, waiting for Paul to come back, who I believe is paying the call of nature. So I'm just wasting half a minute. I don't think it should take him much longer than that for Paul to come back. And I've just been given some more questions anyway, which I'm trying to sort. Okay, well perhaps we can make a start anyway. What we'll do, we've only got the one microphone, so we will pass it along the row. The first question, which was put by Alan Ware, a lot of small business are concerned how leaving the European Union could affect them business-wise. What does UKIP think about the likelihood of an adverse outcome for them? Stephen, can I?
Yes, I think probably most of you can hear me now. I didn't realise about the microphone. This is one of those fear factors that they're actually going to keep promulgating against businesses throughout the country. Only last week I was speaking at the Institute of Chartered Accountants in London, in front of the audience, where a couple of hundred chartered accountants and people who basically the finance officers of major FTSE 100 and 250 companies. I was the sole opposition to membership of the European Union. There was the new organisation, Centre for Business. There was Foundation for Business. They're a supporter for Europe, Foundations for Europe. I couldn't think how many more they would have liked to get on. But when you actually ask who's actually organising these companies, who are paying for them, it's the same people. It's like Roland Rudd, who's a massive public policy person who has a company that promotes, for his living, his business, promotes other companies and gets paid for it. It's Clark, it's Heseltine. They fund them, along with Mandelson, and believe it or not, Blair. And what I found interesting is when you get Blair and Mandelson and Clark and Heseltine all joining together, putting together spin and fear, it kind of reminds me of another little document they tried to make us all fearful about, and the weapons of mass destruction. So first of all, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, and the reason very clear for this. Firstly, as we've mentioned today, not only is Tim Conlon, but Civitas and Open Europe have mentioned that our membership of the European Union, through the regulations that we have to take on board, account for somewhere in the region between 100 and 140 billion pounds a year. Those are regulations that we could look at and remove and therefore ensure that our businesses have less regulation. A second factor is the jobs I've mentioned. The 3 million a day is a myth, and in any event, we lose more business to Europe because they actually have this deficit and there's 8 million jobs out there. We actually pay £55 million a day, which is in terms of about 17.6 billion that we pay as a membership fee. And what it also does, it prevents governments in this country from introducing legislation that could affect small and medium-sized businesses to our advantage. One big disadvantage that most of our shops, the small and medium-sized businesses have, is that they have to pay business rates for the premises that they operate from. They also have to pay national insurance, and they also have to pay the European Union tax of the VAT. But the large corporations that you'll see rolled out one after another, like the ones I saw last week, including the Lions Bours, don't have to pay them in the same way. Because through transfer pricing policies, and through the use of skillful tax evasion, i.e. using Luxembourg at 15% corporation tax, they have the ability to not pay the tax that the small and medium-sized businesses have. And I'm actually at the moment undergoing the policies for UKIP, and one of the things that we are considering is one single tax for people and for businesses, with the abolition of national insurance for employers, the abolition of business rates in local areas, and the abolition of the opportunity for large corporations to avoid the tax that they should be paying in this country by taking them out and giving them a distinct disadvantage. So I would say to yourself, don't be afraid. The policies make it worse for you already. By getting out, you'd actually get benefits. And once you've got a government like UKIP, you'd actually even get better benefits because we'd be able to move the taxation in your favour. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Now we've got 3 questions here around a similar theme. Does UKIP have any policies on dealing with Islamic extremism? Will UKIP shut down Sharia courts and Islamic bank accounts? Well, the 3 questions are on the same theme. Paul, would you like to?
Yeah. Well, I'll deal with that. Well, firstly, with regards Islamic extremism, I think we can all join in our condolences for drummer Lee Rigby. I think what happened in Woolwich was, well, just appalling, frankly. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And the fact that something like that can happen on the streets of London makes it altogether more frightening. I held a seminar in the European Parliament only 2 weeks ago on Islamic extremism, and it was about the radicalisation of children. And let me just say this before I get into the meat of this. What we shouldn't be doing is arming Islamic extremists Because that's what we're going to do in Syria. And we shouldn't be putting boots on the ground in Syria, and we shouldn't have a drop of British soldiers' blood spilt anymore in the Middle East, and we should bring our boys home from Afghanistan. And I think that would go some way to dealing with Islamic extremism in this country, because it would do away with their argument that is used by people like Chowdhury, who, can I just say, should be locked up. Now, that would do away with their argument that they're only retaliating against British interference in the Middle East. Now, what we would do, and what we would support, is a bill going through the House of Lords at the moment, which is showing concern about the growth of Sharia law in Britain. There are 85 Sharia courts now in Britain. When Sharia courts, or Sharia law, first came into this country, it dealt with primarily Islamic contracts and Islamic issues. It's now dealing with issues that it shouldn't have anything to do with, such as violence in the home, such as divorce. Frankly, what I would say on this issue is that there is one law in this land, and that is our own common law, and quite frankly, if you don't like our law, then go live somewhere else. So, we will be supporting Baroness Cox's bill, which is trying to curtail the power of Sharia courts. What we also should do is, quite frankly, withdraw from the Human Rights Act altogether. Well, let me just make this final point. This is a job, I believe, not only for our security services, but also for the Muslim communities themselves. It's easy enough to go on TV and speak out after the murder of drummer Lee Rigby or other attempts of terrorism and say, isn't it terrible? But what they've got to do is now take action. Take action in their own mosques, take action in the madrasas, which are widespread now across this country. The Muslim community has to take some responsibility here by rooting out the extremists themselves, and if they do that, they will get all the help that they need from ourselves. That's the thing.
Thank you, Paul. Now, three questions all surrounding the same theme. If UKIP were to be successful in the next local elections, where would we stand on the issue of building on greenbelt land? Louise?
This is a really, really big issue, actually. I'm a councillor in Cheshire. We have lots of problems at the moment. The local councils have to produce what is called a local plan. Now, I don't know if yours has been published here. Yeah, I'm sure some of you, usually, yeah, you can go and have a look at it in your council office and the town hall, etc. If it's anything like the one that's been done in Cheshire, it's an absolute abomination. And lots of our beautiful greenbelt countryside is now up to being built on by developers who want to put a lot of nice social housing estates there. Even though, and I'm assuming it'll be a similar situation to here in Southport, we have many underutilised buildings already, buildings that stand empty that could be renovated and used for accommodation, and also many, many brownfield sites. So the issue of greenbelt is one that UKIP is looking really seriously at. We would absolutely disagree fundamentally with the building of any project on greenbelt land. Absolutely, utterly. And it all comes back to UKIP's belief in localism. And we really do believe in localism in a very direct way. As Paul was saying earlier on in his speech, if a developer, if a council is trying to push through a development on greenbelt land outside of your town, then you should have a right to vote on that. And if UKIP ran more councils and UKIP could lead more councils, then we would be able to offer that to the people of this country and to the people of our towns and communities. This is why it's so vital, ladies and gentlemen, that we win more seats in the local elections next year. But we are against building on greenbelt land. There is enough brownfield sites in this country, industrial wasteland, that we can develop without touching this beautiful green and pleasant land. And I say, leave it alone, please, Mr. Cameron.
Just to add a local flavour to this question, we're told that the actual population of Southport is decreasing. Now, as Louise says, there's an awful lot of empty property which could be brought back into use. And also, if the idea is to increase the number of people in the town, i.e. a lot coming in from Romania, Bulgaria, Poland or whatever, if the idea is to bring more people into the town, where are these people going to work? Is anybody aware of a lot of jobs that are going available in Southport at the present time? Because I'm not aware of them. So, I mean, we've got to look at this as a rounded argument. First of all, the population is decreasing. We've no jobs in Southport for people to work, and we've got to put the existing empty buildings back into use. That's just putting the Southport angle onto that. Okay, now we'll move on to the next. Well, there's 3 questions which are on a similar theme, so I'll read them all out. Why do you think that Cameron is staunchly pro-EU when it is manifestly obvious that Britain would be better off out? How can a nation of 63 million people negotiate trade deals with the rest of the world better than an unelected supranational entity of 500 million people? And leaving the EU seems a great idea. How realistic are our chances to do that? Any offers?
I think I can take the train. I'm going to stand up because it looks like I'm being lost behind the trees here. Something like one, actually, quite frankly. There's a green and pleasant land out here, and I think I'll see more trees would be very helpful. We are, as Paul has said, the 6th largest economic trading nation. We have a population, I think, more than 63 million people. Actually, there is this DVD which uses German data from the German government that suggests that we're actually getting closer to 70 million. But what is missing in the equation when I ask the question, can we trade on our own without an unelected group of people making the decisions on our, is actually flipping the coin and looking at the other nearly 200 nations in the world. How many of them, like Korea, or Australia, or New Zealand, or Brazil, or Argentina, or the strongest economy in South America, Chile, how many of them are a single, independent nation with their own parliaments, their own monetary control, who are able to enter into agreements with either the European Union or other countries, but have not yet joined into a club where they're paying £53 million a day? It seems rather odd to me that we only have 27 nations in the world that have decided the best way of having an agreement is by all joining together, losing your sovereignty, and then deciding how easy it is between us to make a decision to join with somebody else. And one of the more complicating factors that people never consider when looking at these trade agreements is actually when you have 27 countries putting their own representatives, maybe in through the Commission or through the External Action Service or through the negotiated way that they want to do so, you've got to try and make an agreement between 27 people before you enter into that trading relationship with, say, the United States or Korea. Well, how many of you have ever wanted to go to the cinema and you've got your family there trying to decide which film you want to go and see? Well, just imagine the Germans trying to go on to watch their movie with the French and the Dutch and the British. There's going to be a huge amount of complication, a huge amount lost in translation about how you want to have them negotiated. But the one thing is absolutely clear, is that you are not negotiating on behalf of your country for the best interests of your country, because you're having to compromise with 26 other people. So the fact is, most of the world trades without a relationship of a club. It's much more difficult because you've got to negotiate, and you're never going to actually have to trade on behalf of your own nation. We're better off out. We can trade easily. It will not deter business to come into this country. Thank you.
The next question is aimed at Paul, so we'll put it to Paul. What are your thoughts on the privatisation of Royal Mail? Are you for or against?
Well, if it was 10 years ago, I would have been completely against it. Let me just give you a brief history. We've got a real problem with Royal Mail at the moment because the world has changed. Many people do things by email now, whereas they used to send letters. Communication has changed. Back in the late 1990s, the Royal Mail was a state monopoly that actually was making money. It was a one-off. And then the EU came along and it passed the first Postal Services Directive, which basically took away the most profitable part of Royal Mail. Then the second Postal Services Directive broke Royal Mail up and forced, if you like, privatisation. So now, when you get your letters through the door, you'll notice that it will usually have TNS written on it. Is it TNS? TNT or DHL or UK Mail. Well, that's all because of the European Union, because they forced the breakup of Royal Mail through the Postal Services Directives. Now, they just tried to do it recently to Norway, and Norway said, bog off. We're not members of the EU, because Norway knew that they needed to keep their mail nationalised, because the least profitable parts are those living in the far-flung areas up by the Arctic Circle, and they knew they needed to keep it nationalised simply to ensure that those people continue to receive mail. Now, the EU has broken up our service. Our service is losing money over hand and fist, month on month. I would like to see UKIP, if it came to power, to initiate a Royal Commission to look at whether it will be profitable to renationalise Royal Mail. I can't give a commitment to it now, but what I will say is that the Mail is only in the situation it's in because of Postal Services Directives, which not only came from the European Union, but the rapporteur, or the author of these directives, who guided them from the European Parliament, is a Labour MEP from this region, called Brian Simpson. A Labour MEP, it's like Neil Kinnock now, don't it? A Labour MEP, who has forced the breakup of Royal Mail in this country. I want you to think about that, because that, to me, that's an absolute disgrace, and we should never have been in a situation where we had to implement these Postal Services Directives in the first place.
Thanks for that, Paul. Next question. What is UKIP's policy regarding care for the elderly in care homes? The present government takes £75,000 off you for the sale of your home. There are many voters waiting to see what UKIP would offer. Now, this isn't something that I'm aware that UKIP has a direct policy on, but Louise, can I ask you to give your...
It's Derek that asked this question. Derek, wherever you are, I can't see... I'm not going to insult your intelligence, Derek, by pretending that any of us here are going to be able to provide you with a full answer, because this is one part of our welfare policy that is actually being developed ready for the September conference in London. However, we have a wonderful lady called Star Etheridge who is head of that policy unit, who is a wonderful lady, who is coming up with some fantastic proposals. And I can tell you this, and I'm sure Stephen will concur as a fellow member of the NEC, whatever that policy is that they develop and put to us before September, I can tell you now, I feel personally, it is an abomination that people like yourself will work and save and have their own home, only to have it taken away from them when they need it most. And that one thing that they wanted to maybe leave to their children. My grandparents went through exactly the same thing when both of them had to sadly go into a nursing home. And every single penny, there was absolutely nothing left, went into providing care home fees. It was an absolute disgrace. They'd worked, my granddad, as a miner his entire life for that small little two-bedroom house, and every single penny went to the government in care home fees. It was an utter disgrace. So whatever Start brings to the table, I'm sure it'll be something that we all can be proud of, and it will be a policy that UKIP can be proud of. And I'll be fighting for people like you, Derek, when that comes to the NEC, because I want to see us have a policy that's positive and reflects what we want to do for the elderly people who have worked so hard for this country.
Thank you, Louise. Right. Assuming a very good result in the Euro elections, what is the best realistic result in the next general election for UKIP? And I'll also read out the other question, which if you plan to be a broad political force, where do you see your principal weaknesses?
Right, I'll tell you what. I'll let the members of the NEC do this one. I'll do the principal weaknesses.
Okay. Which are the members of the NEC on either side?
Well done, chaps. Our weakness is also our strength when it comes to general elections. Our weakness is this. Actually, no, our strength is this. We appeal to people who are working class, who are middle class, who are from Labour areas, who are from Conservative areas, who are from North and who are from the South. Because we believe that our policies, we know, thank you, that our policies are classless, they're common sense. That is a strength, but it's also a weakness. And it's a weakness because our support isn't concentrated. The Labour support is concentrated in the cities. The Conservative support, generally, is concentrated in the suburbs and the shires. UKIP support is right across the board. We're as popular in Birkdale as we are in Buckingham. We're as popular in the Lake District as we are in Liverpool. We're as popular in Southport as we are in Southampton. Our policies transcend the class system, and that is a strength because it means that we are truly a national party. And it also means that we end up in a situation whereby you have me, a comprehensive schoolboy from Birkdale, who sits next in the European Parliament to my colleague, the Earl of Dartmouth, Princess Diana's half-brother. So we're a very eclectic bunch. We're a very eclectic bunch, and it's a strength. But the weakness is that our support isn't concentrated. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to build up clusters in certain areas where we are taking council seats. That's why local elections are key to UKIP. Because I guarantee you, if we can get those clusters, if we can get councillors elected, you will get a UKIP councillor who will do a good job, and then you'll get 2, and then you'll get 4. That's the way to do it, ladies and gentlemen. So our strength is that we're a broad-based, classless national party. Our weakness is that that does not allow us to build targeted, clustered areas at this moment in time. So I hope I've been honest on that point.
Two members of the NEC that have been left with a more difficult question. What is the best realistic result for the next general election? I just kind of think to myself of George Osborne was jogging around his Notting. Is it not on? There you go. That just goes to show that we are part of the weakest link on either side. I'm reminded when I think about this question of George Osborne jogging along his Notting Hill area, waving, no doubt, to all his friends from Eton who are living around the corner. When he comes across a little boy with a small kitten in a box, and he stops and he looks at the little boy and he says, "Excuse me, little boy, what type of kitten is this?" And the little boy looks up at him and he says, "It's a Conservative kitten, sir. He has warm beams, his heart rises, his chest fills out, and he manages to jog an extra 300 metres than he normally would do." 2 days later, he's jogging with David, and they're coming past the same area of Notting Hill, when across from the corner he sees the little boy, the same box, and he says to David, "David, quick, I've got something very, very special for you here. Let's get over here." They jog over to the little boy, and they say, "Little boy, what is the kitten that you got? What type of kitten is it?" And the little boy looks up, and he goes, "I told you a couple of days ago what type of kitten he was." He said, No, tell me again." "Okay, David, look, tell me, what type of kitten is it?" And the little boy looks up and he says, "It's a UKIP kitten." And George says, "But 2 days ago you said it was a Conservative kitten." He says, "Yes, 2 days ago it had its eyes closed. Today it's got its eyes wide open." Ladies and gentlemen, that's what's happening all across the country. People's eyes are being wide open now to the terrible issues and the problems that these three parties have. And that is Nigel's famous words, you can't get cigarette paper between them. So I would say to you what is the best result that we would get in the next general election. One, that we damage them terminally, that they look over the shoulder knowing that UKIP is there. The second best result, and I predict this, is that we will actually get the most votes for any political party across the country. But because of the first past the post system, notwithstanding the fact that we will get the most votes because we're supported from north to south to east to west, we won't get the number of seats that we will deserve. But we will get elected MPs, we will get representation, and you will have a voice in that Parliament that's going to be standing up for you saying, we want change, and change we want now.
Questions here. There's a question with regards to getting out of Sefton that I won't spend time on, but if the person that asked this question would like to see me afterwards, I will explain what we're doing with regards to that. There's not a great lot that we can do other than to try and pressure the other parties at the present time, because as you're aware we don't have any councillors in Sefton, albeit hopefully after next May we will. But we are already taking steps with regards to trying to get us out of Sefton by discussing the issue with the other parties to try and find some common ground on that. So if you want to hear more, then contact me after the meeting. One question, if we can deal with this. As an ex-member of the Fleet Air Arm, I am very interested to know how UKIP would prioritise defence expenditure, or indeed what are your thoughts on the matter considering the present state of our defence?
Right. Well, I think the present state, well, let's just say I think that our soldiers and our boys are probably the most dedicated, the most skilled, the most hard-working and the most courageous on the planet. let down like a cheap pair of braces by the government in Westminster. We are cutting defence spending at a time when the world is in quite a precarious position. When the Middle East is going up in flames, particularly in Syria, when we're still in Afghanistan, when you had the problems in Mali, where William Hague is now not ruling out us putting boots on the ground in Syria. And I think it's bonkers that when the Libyan conflict was going on, one of our aircraft carriers was being towed to the scrapyard in Turkey. We don't have aircraft carriers anymore. It's a crazy situation whereby we have the planes but have nothing for them to take off from. It's a crazy situation, it's a dangerous situation, and it needs rectifying. Now, UKIP would increase expenditure on defence, and I think that's only sensible. And one of the ways you could pay for it is you could stop giving away £25 million a day in foreign aid. We're giving this money to countries like China, and look at India. India doesn't even want our foreign aid, yet we still give it to it. India has a space programme. India has more billionaires and millionaires than Britain. India has aircraft carriers. In fact, the head of the Indian fleet, before its new models come online, is the former head of the British fleet. It's Hermes. It's Hermes. So it seems to me crazy that we're handing over money in foreign aid to countries that don't need it and don't want it. That's around £25 million a day. That is a budget which has been ring-fenced by these idiots in Westminster, and quite frankly, I would rather see that money spent on our troops, on our boys, and given them the best.
Right, we'll make this the final question that I'm going to read out, but by all means, colour any of us if you want to speak to us further with any other questions that you might have on the floor after. And this question, there's two questions, but they're in a similar vein. What are your plans for the future of our young people? And the other is, do you not think that now is the time to encourage and promote UKIP to younger people with this current climate and no future prospects? Get them on board now.
Well, this is quite a nice note to end on, isn't it? Because we're talking about the future. And the future of this party has to be one that we develop and we nurture. And the young independence part of our party is actually one of the fastest growing areas of membership, which is really exciting. So please, any of you who have young people interested in UKIP, they can join just for £2 online, and they can get all the information electronically, and it's proving really, really popular. So please, please encourage people. We have to get into the universities. We are doing that. We now have several groups within the universities across the northwest. Chester being one of the most successful. There's a really vibrant group there in Chester where Stephen actually lives. The guys there are fantastic, and there's no reason why we can't go on to replicate that across the universities. And in terms of what we will do for the young people and work prospects, well, I think, like Paul touched on before, we should be encouraging our people to look at vocational education, giving them a vocational education that is worth the same and is seen the same as academic qualifications. We should stop telling our young people that they're lazy and that Romanians, Bulgarians and other Eastern Europeans are far more hardworking than they are. And then maybe they would have the impetus and the drive to go and do something. Because if you put somebody down for long enough, then surely they're going to believe it, aren't they? So please, don't let's put our young people down. They're young people who are innovative, they are creative, they have something to offer this country. I believe UKIP are the only party who can offer our young people a bright future. Please get them to come along. We need more young independents. They are the future for this country and for this party. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Right, ladies and gentlemen, as I say, that's the last question that we'll read out, but by all means stop any of us if you want to speak further, and we'll try and answer your queries. Just a couple of things that I will bring to your attention. Yeah, okay, yeah, I already have that, Peter. What I will mention to you is on Saturday the 6th of July at the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool, we have a one-day conference. Now, we had one of these last year and it was a tremendous success. And last year, of course, we weren't flying as high in the polls as we are at the moment. So we've already booked a larger room for this year, but I would imagine that it'll get filled quite quickly. Saturday the 6th of July at the Adelphi Hotel, where we've got so many guest speakers that there should, well, I don't know whether they'll get them all on the stage. They'll have to bring them on about 6 at a time. But top of the bill on that occasion will be our leader, Nigel Farage. So let's hope that we can see some of you along at the Adelphi on the 6th of July. As I said to you earlier on, the Southport branch of UKIP, we do hold meetings every month on the second Thursday of every month at Cherry Tree Lodge in Knowsley Road, 7:30. Now, everybody is welcome to attend those meetings. They're not just members' meetings, they're open meetings that anybody can come along to. And it would be rather nice if we could see some of you come along there. And it would be even nicer if we got that big that we couldn't have our meetings in Cherry Tree Lodge, that we had to come here every month for our meetings. I'd like to thank our guests tonight again, Stephen Woolfe, Louise Bours and Paul Nuttall, our Deputy Leader. Please give them another round of applause. I'd also like to thank the team that have put this effort together tonight. Gordon Ferguson, who's our Southport events organiser. He's here somewhere. He's done all the setting up and the organising tonight. Thank you, Gordon. And the rest of the committee, there's Pat Wayman at the back. She's done a lot as well. The rest of the committee and Betty, thank you very much. The only other thing I will say, because I've already told you that you can stop any of us and talk later, and the ward representatives that I introduced to you earlier on, the only other thing I will say, and I've mentioned it once, I'll mention it again, is on the way out, if you feel inclined to drop any loose change into our bucket at the door, that, well, it doesn't have to be loose change, we'll even take cheques. So, any loose change, paper money...
And put your euros in there because it won't be worth anything. So.
Yes, okay. Thanks very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much.